Were you surprised that he was, if you like, appropriated by Red Bull to be their, what's the description?
Global head of sport.
Thank you very much.
Enormously. And I think I know a lot of other people were as well. And, a lot of other people who spent a lot of time around Klopp and know him pretty well. But yeah, just to clarify, he's global head of sport for Red Bull. So it's not actually necessarily a German-based job, because the whole Red Bull network goes through Brazil, America, England now, United States, it's Austria, of course, Red Bull Salzburg, where his former assistant Pep Lijnders is now head coach. So to me, before we get to the legacy part of it, is worth underlining the job and how he sees it, which he talked about it being a sort of oversight, a sort of mentor role for those coaches. So say, for example, Marco Rosa, RB Leipzig, if you wanted a bit of advice from someone who's like 10 plus years his senior, who's done it all and won it all, maybe that would be quite nice for him. But to me, what this quite clearly says is, at least as far as where his mind is at the moment, Jürgen Klopp is drawing a line under club coaching and saying that is it for me.
I think so. And if you look at his statements as well, he said he's had 25 years on the sidelines. A long, long time. And look, he's still a relatively young bloke as well in coaching terms, if you look at a lot of other coaches about. So I think he's kind of putting like Andy said, a cap on it, and fair play to him. Because I think this is a great role for him personally. We'll perhaps get into the various angles of it, of course, that have already been discussed. But from his point of view, there's no day-to-day operations involved. That's been made key. It's a job where he can have a bit of pressure and where he can have a lot of involvement if he wants to, yet without being super stressed and without the intensity.
It's more thought-based than results-based, really, isn't it? It's more development and discussion. Is it kind of Wenger-ish?
Yeah, he can pitch up at some games that he fancies viewing. Bring his laptop and have a Wi-Fi connection and work from a hotel in LA if he wants 1 week, and then maybe find a little boutique
What's your next job after ATC?
So this work, I mean, at his stage of career, then I think this is a lovely move for him personally. I really, really do. I can see so many pluses for him on this.
But then why the backlash? Why have so many German football fans, given all he's done in Germany for Dortmund, etc., got the hump with him?
Because the whole Red Bull concept is absolutely hated in Germany, and because he's so synonymous with Dortmund. Of course, he was there a month ago for the Tchaikovsky farewell to Jakub Błaszczykowski and Łukasz Piszczek. And so seeing him back on the sidelines in the Dortmund polo and thinking, yeah, he's one of us, and they still miss him. Because he's a guy who they felt was not just a great coach and a successful coach, but a coach who got the club, who understood it. And that's the thing. You had the same feeling. Mainz supporters had the same feeling. Liverpool supporters have had the same thing, that he just connects with the club and its culture. And I guess this is the thing. Like, Klopp's biggest perceived strength in public, at least, is that humanity, that relatability. And I think because of that, maybe we as football fans and football media have projected a set of values onto him that he doesn't necessarily have.
It's called a legacy, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
We look at him as a footballer or a football manager who has got a legacy, something.
And more than that, like a torchbearer for what Dortmund and Liverpool stand for. I think that's the thing, and that's why he has been so missed in Dortmund. And lots of Dortmund fans are out there, and actually people in the media saying he has just like torched his legacy by doing this.
Has he though? This is the thing I don't understand. So you've mentioned about the connectivity that he had with Dortmund fans and Liverpool fans. He still has those. He still had those. He still achieved at both clubs. He hasn't suddenly turned to a bad guy overnight because he's chosen to do this role. I
think that the thing is, and this is a very, very German concept and a very German way of looking at football. People look at Jürgen Klopp and think this is a guy who feels football in his soul. And whereas Red Bull is, and he's talked about it himself before, is a really interesting project in terms of infrastructure, in terms of player development, all that sort of stuff. It's fascinating. I could understand why you would want to be involved in that level. But I guess Klopp has been kind of held to, maybe unfairly, to a sort of higher standard, because the feeling has always been he is about football passion. And Dortmund particularly consider themselves the real. You know, what football's really about, what a match day should be about. You know, the phrase, it's the marketing phrase is echte Liebe, true love. A little bit like Liverpool had This Means More. You know, Liverpool and Dortmund connect in so many ways. They're quite similar in a lot of ways like that, in that it's all about feeling. And Red Bull is the opposite. Now, you've got to bear in mind that the very, very tense history that there has been since RB Leipzig were promoted in 2016 between Borussia Dortmund and RB Leipzig. And if we're taking Klopp as someone who we consider synonymous with Dortmund at this point. Now, there were loads of protests against RB Leipzig because people feel they've circumvented the rules, or at least the spirit of German football, since they've been promoted.
In which way?
In the way that they bought the license of a fifth division club and worked their way up with huge investment, so it's not seen as particularly organic. By the fact that it is, you know, basically a branded club that, you know, is Mark Rundstedt initially, and it changed into Leipzig and RB Leipzig. You can't call it Red Bull Leipzig like it's Red Bull Salzburg, for example, the sister club in Austria, because that's simply not allowed by German football authority rules. But that sense that as well with that they had this long running battle with the DFB, the German FA, because they're meant to be, apart from very exceptional circumstances, the clubs are meant to be member-run entities or member-owned entities. But they sort of sidestep that by making the controlling members all Red Bull employees initially. So, you know, there is a feeling that they've sort of sidestep the spirit of German football. And German fans, as will not surprise you to learn, have not been backward in
coming forward,
expressing that. Yeah, exactly. So in the early days after they were promoted, you had a bull's head thrown on the pitch, paint thrown at the team bus, all this sort of stuff. And when Dortmund first played RB Leipzig once they were promoted, there were a load of banners, like so many banners, protesting Red Bull in the yellow wall. There were some incidents outside the stadium which were really quite nasty between supporters as well. Dortmund had both ends of the ground shut for a game after that, a subsequent home game with Wolfsburg. They were fined over 100,000 euros, and they were fined actually for stuff inside the stadium, where you might be thinking, well, freedom of speech, but they couldn't really, the authorities couldn't really find a way to get them for what happened outside the stadium, the far less savoury stuff that they didn't really have jurisdiction over. So anyway, when you look at this, and when you look at how Red Bull are still protested against, are still looked upon as a club that is an anachronism and against the spirit of German football, bear in mind, when Heidenheim played RB Leipzig last weekend, they had to have 24-hour security around the stadium at Heidenheim because some supporters had broken in last year and sprayed the away end with this like foul-smelling acid that even when you wash it off smells of vomit. And they didn't want that to happen again, so they paid for like 24-hour security for that not to happen. So I think when you look at how Leipzig, not just Leipzig, but the whole Red Bull movement is seen, and then you look at the fact that Klopp is seen to stand for something else, that's why people find it so hard to reconcile.
That's definitely the issue. I think they're going, our guy is going to be promoting their brand. So, and I think you can separate the two things as well, which I think is really, really key. Look, you can completely be disgusted at the way that Red Bull operates in terms of, promoting their brand, putting their brand into various sports. It's not obviously just football that they're in. But I think you can also admire the way that they have gone about business in terms of the structure that they have. the scouting that they have, the network that they have.
I mean, that's where the separation in his mind is.
Yes, and that's why I think it's key to bring that up, because I think we're talking a lot about not us, just generally. I think we're talking a lot about the bad side of Red Bull and this business and everything like that. But I think you've got to look at the part that Klopp is looking at for him and what he enjoys, and I think he's going to be really excited by this role. He
did say, didn't he, a couple of years back, that he thought that the Red Bull project was actually exciting. If I might quote from him, he said, "What Red Bull is doing is a really interesting project, I have to say. They kind of change every year, they sell players, but still a good team." I wonder whether he hasn't kind of intimated his feelings in advance, but we're blinded because we project this image of, what we feel.
Absolutely it.
What we feel he is about.
Who does though? Like that's the thing. I think it's a lot of people on social media that have created this identity and what have you of Jürgen Klopp and what they think. A lot of people who are behind accounts or wherever and don't really live in real life, and everything exists for them online. And I think that's where a lot of this is coming from, quite frankly.
But I think a lot of people who are not online feel that. Sort of match-going football supporters feel that. But they do that. They're doing that same thing as Dotun was saying.
Yeah, I think the protests
projecting a personality onto it that's not really his. And I think that's the thing with most football people. We can feel, as people who absorb the game on a daily basis, that we know them, because they're part of our daily routine. But we don't know them, do we? I think that's a point. So I guess it's a little bit like, when you go into the detail of some of the stuff with Red Bull, like what's upset a lot of fans, for example, and what upset a lot of fans about Red Bull in the first place getting involved, is Dietrich Mateschitz, who was the co-founder of the company, who died a couple of years ago. He's very synonymous with the RB Leipzig project. He's got a sort of far right leaning TV channel, and a lot of German football supporters are understandably very very uneasy about that, to say the least. I would be amazed if Klopp had even thought about that, to be perfectly honest, because we're projecting him. He's one of us. He's one of the fans. He'd be stood next to us watching the game, but he hasn't been doing that, has he, for the last 25 years? As we said, he's been living the game mainly from a technical perspective. Now, because we shave off all these little bits of a personality, that I think if we're talking about our perception of a famous person, any famous person, there's probably two or maximum three major characteristics that you build a sort of imaginary personality around. Now, Jürgen Klopp, for example, something that you rarely hear mentioned, he's very religious. Yeah, for example, and that's something that's a huge part of his life and how he chooses to live it. But that's not something that really fits into the caricature, is it?
No, it's not. It is. It's something like, I go to church, and funnily enough, we were going through different people in sports around the Olympic time, I think it was, and where they were mentioning their religion as well. And Klopp was one of the videos that actually did come up as well. So yeah, it's something that he has touched on and what have you like that. So yeah, I guess it's like something that's only kind of crept in recently, and like realised, I didn't realise Klopp was like that.
Well, no, because we think of him as a guy who's shouting for our team on the touchline, and when he's not, he's having a beer and a cigarette in the pub.
Well, I don't know about the cigarette, but one thing...
Maybe a vape now.
Yeah. One thing we did think about him was that he was the German national coach in waiting. Where does this job as head of global sports for Red Bull now leave that option, or were we projecting too much in that respect?
Well, this is interesting because... Clearly, it seems it was clear that it's something that's interested him. The timing has not been right. I wondered if, when he left Liverpool, especially once Hansi Flick went, the timing would be right, because it looked as if Julian Nagelsmann was a short-term fix, that he would go back into the club game quite quickly. But Nagelsmann's really got a taste for it. And he's become involved.
I'm not surprised.
He's made progress. But Is it? I think it's a bit of a surprise because you look at the age he is, and normally you'd be thinking, right, he should be out there like coaching in an elite club. But I guess he's found the job more involving than he thought he would, and he signed this extended contract until after the World Cup in 2026. Who knows? He might even stay longer if it goes well. We just don't know at the moment, do we?
I just think it's a nice level of involvement for you right now if you're an international manager, and maybe Nagelsmann's telegraphed that, and he's seen the intense manner at which high-level football is ran now, the amount of football as well that you have to play.
Right.
Being part of a bit of a circus and chaos at Bayern as well, and thought, do I really want that? I might still be young, but do I really want to do that young? I think there's even more reason. Why do that to yourself when you're young?
Yeah.
And if reports are to be believed about this Klopp clause for the German national team, whether they're not, there is a common theme here, and that is kind of, I just want to take a step back and manage things at my level and keep things within my control. I don't want it to do with anything this day-to-day intensity.
Even though you're talking about Julian Nagelsmann, it actually sounds like we're talking about Jürgen Klopp in terms of how he departed from
Well, it could be similar aims at like different stages of their career. But I guess that's it, because when it seemed like it would be the right time for Klopp, it was because all of a sudden he talked about how he was drained of energy. Now, it's not quite the same intensity, is it? If you're doing international coaching, there's an intensity during a major tournament, of course. And to see him end up there at some later point sounds fair enough. It's interesting, though, the initial reports that have suggested that there was a release clause for Klopp in his Red Bull contract if he wanted to take the Germany job. It seems like that might not be correct. Although, if he did want the Germany job, I'm sure they'd all sit down.
That was my thought.
Let's be realistic. Are we ruling him out of that Germany job now with this job, which is less intensive?
For the moment, definitely. I mean, look, he's made a choice in terms of rhythm of life. He still wants to be involved in football, but he's been quite open about that. Now, this is not us projecting on Klopp. This is what Klopp has actually said, that he just didn't have any more in the tank. Now, of course, people will say, well, he kind of said that when he was leaving Dortmund, you know, the fact that he felt he'd done everything there and he'd maybe run out of ideas and needed to freshen up a little bit, and then he got the opportunity to take the Liverpool job like 5 months later. But this is different, of course, because he's 10 years older now. And it does make a massive difference.
Yeah, and he's been at the highest level with Liverpool, competed at the very highest level, won it all, and and I think that's key. So
how exhausting must it be to take on Manchester City for 9 years?
Of course it is. You can see some people burn out by 2 years and think,
Yeah, usually they're gone before 2 years, but not in the last decade, obviously.